7th and 8th grade. Good morning, it's Mr. Pedigo. Hope you are having a lovely start to the week. We're talking about pages 752 and 753 today. And I'm going to try to make this brief because I know you have other things to do, but let's take a peek into history and see what we can deduce as the important bits. What you need to know is that the president we are talking about today is none other, my friends, than Warren G. Harding. Now, we care about Warren G. Harding because he changed some things in regard to the way America looked at boosting the economy, which is what they wanted to do during this time, because the economy was in shambles. Why was it in shambles, you might ask? Well, if you had read last week's work, you would know that the economy was in shambles because of something called World War I. Long story short, World War I did not exactly bolster the American economy. Why? Well, because everybody was fighting or dying of the Spanish flu, which you can see how that might take a toll on the economy. But we're going to use some reverence in looking at this. So basically, the economy is not looking good. Warren G. Harding, actually a senator from Ohio. How many senators does every state have, you might ask? Well, you should know that it's 2. He's a senator, he's elected president, and his method is a bit interesting. Why? Well, the reason it's interesting, friends, is because we can all agree that having a strong economy is a good thing, regardless of whether or not you're a Republican, a Democrat, right wing, left wing, middle wing, side wing, other side wing. We can all agree that having a healthy economy is good, but where people can't bond together is about how we go about making the economy excellent. So Warren G. Harding's policy in regard to bolstering and bringing back up the economy was to basically implement something called trickle-down economics, which we'll hear more about when we get to the Reagan administration. But the long and short of trickle-down economics is that we are going to limit government involvement in business and ultimately give more freedom to the states and to big business. How is that going to help the common man, though, you might ask? Well, if you look on page 753 with your magnifier, you can see that the idea is that if big businesses have more money, they're going to be more likely to expand. With expansion, you have more employees. With more employees, you have more people making money. The opposite would be, let's say you put a bunch of, you started taxing big businesses more, wealthy businesses, and they're not going to have the incentive to expand and hire people. And this is relatively successful for Mr. President Warren G. Harding. We see the economy goes ticks up a little bit. That being said, friends, what happens is there's a little bit of corruption in the presidency of Warren G. Harding. Not necessarily corruption directly related to Warren G. Harding, but to his cabinet and other people, high-ranking politicians and political officials within the administration. You're going to read something about the Teapot Dome scandal, which, aside from being the strangest named place in Wyoming, is also a pretty big deal because it shows how sometimes the government can do things that are not exactly right. In fact, might be a little bit corrupt. Teapot Dome scandal. You're going to read that we have a gentleman named Albert Fall, who Albert Fall falls from grace, you might say, because Albert Fall does something called letting private businesses use naval petroleum reserves. And that's not very fair. He takes bribes. Bribes can sometimes be good, depending on what kind of bribe it is. But when it comes to letting private companies use federally owned petroleum and oil reserves, that's a problem. And so this really tarnishes is a fancy word that means poo-poos the Harding administration. And that's not good. And we're going to see that he actually is convicted of crimes while in office. Kind of a big deal. And that does really kind of, long story short, Teapot Dome is kind of just the tip of the iceberg, basically accepting bribes and giving unfair access to the people who you're taking the bribes from. In this case, it's about oil and naval oil reserves in a place called Teapot Dome, Wyoming. We're going to see tomorrow how this ultimately doesn't really bode well for President Harding. We'll touch back, talk later. Hope you guys have a beautiful time. Remember, connect the dots in history. This is always related to what we read last week, or the last day, or last time we read in the history book, and of course it will be related to what we read tomorrow. This is a timeline. History is all connected. It's all connected. And by learning about this stuff, we can make sure that we can recognize corruption and be aware of corruption happening in the present day, and also aware of what methods worked for bolstering and boosting the economy. Talk at you later.